Picture this. You are standing on the impeccably manicured grass of the south lawn of the White House.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah. And you are looking at those neoclassical columns, the literal backdrop of American geopolitical power. But instead of a quiet press briefing or like a formal state dinner, your vision is just completely dominated by a 92-foot customized metal combat cage.
Towering right over the lawn.
Exactly, towering over the lawn. They called it the Claw. And you've got elite mixed martial artists walking straight out of the Oval Office, stepping into that steel octagon and trading blood, sweat, and heavy leather.
It's a totally surreal image.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring a pretty jarringly critical piece of writing today from the platform Knowledge is King.
Right, by Mark Wells.
Yeah, Mark Wells. And he titled it White House Octagon, the New Roman Circus. And honestly, the imagery alone is enough to stop you in your tracks.
Oh, absolutely. The visual of that night is completely surreal, and Wells kind of uses it as the anchor for this much broader, incredibly sharp analysis.
Right.
We're looking at a very specific lens on modern political spectacle. The event in question was UFC Freedom 250, which took place on June 14th, 2026.
A huge night.
Yeah. And according to Wells, this wasn't just some bizarre PR stunt. He argues that we were watching the really dangerous intersection of high production entertainment, civic apathy, and political stagecraft.
To really get to the bottom of that argument, we really have to immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of that evening. Because for the first time in American history, the grounds of the White House were transformed into a professional combat arena.
Which is still hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. You had 4,300 VIPs seated on the lawn itself, just cheering for knockouts, literally feet from where international policy is drafted.
Yeah.
And then just down the street at the Ellipse, tens of thousands more fans were gathered around these massive screens, completely captivated by the violence in the cage. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because context is everything when you are looking at an event of this magnitude.
Right, you have to look at the official story first.
Exactly. Officially, the source notes, this was billed as a massive duel celebration. It was basically designed to kick off the nation's semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the United States.
A huge milestone.
Right, and simultaneously, it was serving as a celebration of President Trump's 80th birthday.
So that was the official framing, right? A blend of a patriotic milestone and a high-profile birthday event.
Yeah.
But Wells, he looks entirely past that official billing to really examine the underlying mechanics of the spectacle. He argues that erecting a fighting cage on the literal seat of executive power is the execution of a deeply, deeply ancient playbook.
Wow.
Yeah. The core thesis of his post is that the line separating professional combat sports from sophisticated statecraft hasn't just been blurred over time. On that night in June, he says it completely dissolved.
It just collapsed entirely onto the same patch of grass. And bringing 4,300 people to scream for blood outside the Oval Office, it feels like a profound shift in how leadership interacts with the public. But, putting a cage on the South Lawn isn't just an eccentric, modern television production choice, is it?
No, not according to this piece.
When you look at the crowds, the VIPs, and the sheer scale of the broadcast, Wells points out that we are actually watching a 2,000-year-old political formula booting up.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Wells takes us straight back to ancient Rome to explain the true function of what happened on the South Lawn.
Ancient Rome, okay.
Yeah, he centers his entire argument on the Roman satirist Juvenal, who was writing around the year 100 AD. And Juvenal coined a phrase that has survived for millennia.
Bread and circuses, right.
Exactly. Panem et circenses, of bread and circuses. But Juvenal wasn't just, being poetic. He was documenting a real tragic shift in the psychological makeup of the Roman public.
And the history of that shift is fascinating because, it wasn't something imposed on them by force, right?
No, not at all.
It sounds like Juvenal was watching a society willingly hand over the keys to the empire. Because the Roman populace historically held ultimate democratic power.
They did.
They elected the leaders, they commanded the legions, they basically shaped the known world. So if a society is going to just give up the power to govern itself, the citizens have to be getting something incredibly intoxicating in return.
Right. And they received comfort and distraction, and they accepted that trade entirely willingly.
Wow.
According to the source, the Roman public allowed themselves to be pacified by two very simple provisions from the state.
The bread and the circuses.
Exactly. The bread was literally cheap subsidized grain to just keep their stomachs full.
Yeah.
And the circuses were massive, violent, grand-scale entertainment.
Like the gladiators.
Yeah, we were talking about gladiatorial combat in the Colosseum and the deafening chariot races in the Circus Maximus.
Yeah.
The citizens gave up their voice in the empire, their oversight of the government, in exchange for a front row seat to the violence.
Okay, I have to push back on this comparison just a little bit. Or at least play devil's advocate for anyone listening who might be a huge fan of mixed martial arts. Because is it really fair for Wells to compare modern sports fans to the ancient Roman mob?
I can see why people would take issue with that.
Right, I mean, combat sports offer an undeniable thrill. It is a primal human thing to watch a fight. And the athletes who step into that octagon, they're some of the most disciplined, highly trained professionals on earth.
Absolutely.
They aren't slaves fighting for their lives. They are willing competitors at the top of their game. So why does an incredible night of fights have to be interpreted as a sign of democratic collapse? Isn't a fight sometimes just a fight?
Well, it's interesting because Wells actually anticipates that exact counter-argument in the post.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he explicitly acknowledges the intoxicating thrill of combat sports, and he notes the supreme discipline of the fighters who competed at UFC Freedom 250.
So he's not against the sport itself.
No, he isn't making a moral judgment against mixed martial arts at all. Nor is he saying that being entertained is inherently a civic crime. The danger doesn't lie in the sport itself.
Okay.
The danger, Wells argues, emerges when that visceral entertainment is deliberately co-opted by the state.
Ah, I see. Because in Rome, the games were never just put on for the fun of it.
Exactly.
The emperors weren't just huge fans of chariot racing who wanted to share their hobby with the public. They knew exactly what they were doing with that architecture and that bloodshed.
Right. The spectacles were highly sophisticated, calculated tools of statecraft.
Wow.
Just think about the psychological function of a massive arena event, especially one involving physical combat. It provides an immediate release valve for public anger.
That makes total sense.
Right. If the citizenry is frustrated with economic hardships or political stagnation, the state provides a sanctioned arena where they can scream, cheer, and let out that aggression.
It gives them an outlet.
And it also unifies a fractured populace under a banner of visceral, shared excitement. But the ultimate function, and this is really the crux of Wells's warning, is distraction.
Distraction from what, exactly?
Well, the Roman games were engineered to purposefully draw the citizenry's eyes away from things the emperors didn't want them looking at.
Which usually meant the things that actually impacted their daily lives. You know, systemic corruption, crippling economic instability, endless and costly foreign wars.
Exactly.
The emperors realized that participating in a democracy requires a massive amount of cognitive friction. Understanding trade policy, evaluating a war, holding leaders accountable, that takes real work.
It's exhausting.
It is. But watching two people fight takes zero cognitive effort. It is a low-friction, high-arousal activity that completely hijacks the brain's evolutionary wiring.
And that concept of cognitive friction is so central to understanding the modern application of this playbook.
How so?
Well, Wells argues that when you erect a 92-foot metal fighting cage on the literal seat of executive power in the United States, you are deploying that exact same ancient machinery.
Just upgraded for the 21st century.
Right. The setting has evolved from the stone arches of the Colosseum to the high-tech video screens and the custom rigging of the claw, but the core mechanics of state-sponsored distraction remain absolutely identical.
It's almost like giving a crying toddler an iPad.
That's a great way to put it.
You aren't solving the reason they are upset. You aren't feeding them or fixing the problem. You are just overwhelmingly flooding their sensory input so they forget they were crying in the first place.
Exactly.
So Wells is arguing that the White House Octagon is basically the geopolitical equivalent of handing the American public a giant, violent iPad.
Yes.
Which brings us to the actual toll this takes on our modern civic health. Because the warning in knowledge is king isn't just about a few hours of diverted attention on a Saturday night.
No, the long-term consequence that Wells identifies is much more insidious than that. He refers to it as the manufacturing of civic apathy.
Civic apathy?
Yeah, the ultimate danger of the modern circus is that it fundamentally rewires how a society engages with its own governance.
Let's think about that mechanism in the context of our regular news cycle. I mean, it is so incredibly easy for us to be completely consumed by spectacle.
Oh, absolutely. It happens every day.
It really feels like a transaction we are making every single day, often without even realizing it. We are basically trading in our critical thinking and our civic awareness for quick, easy dopamine hits.
Right.
We willingly hand over our awareness of global events in exchange for the comfort of just being passively entertained.
And that trade-off awareness for comfort is precisely how Wells frames the crisis. And it's really vital to understand the motivation behind it from the perspective of those in power.
Okay, what's the motivation?
Wells makes an impartial but very sharp observation about the nature of truth in politics.
Yeah.
Historically and currently, the truth has a funny way of being deeply inconvenient to people who hold authority.
Oh, for sure. The truth usually involves complex systemic problems, difficult economic trade-offs, and uncomfortable realities that just make the public angry.
Right.
It was so much harder to govern an informed, frustrated public than an entertained, distracted one.
Which is exactly why these massive spectacles are so heavily funded and aggressively promoted.
Yeah.
According to Wells's analysis, entertainment is deployed to keep the populace comfortable in their complacency.
Wow.
If you are receiving a steady, overwhelming stream of dopamine from high-production entertainment, whether that is a literal cage fight on the White House lawn or just, the algorithmically perfected endless scroll of content on your phone, you are significantly less likely to engage in the difficult, frustrating work of civic oversight.
You just abdicate your role in the republic.
You do.
You stop being a participant and you just become a spectator in the stands. You sit back and wait to be entertained by the very people who are supposed to be answering to you.
Exactly.
It's a brilliant way to neutralize oversight without ever having to pass a restrictive law. You just make the alternative to caring so shiny and loud that no one wants to do the work of caring anymore.
That is the apathy engine working at full capacity.
The apathy engine.
Yeah, and Wells doesn't leave this as a purely philosophical theory about dopamine and ancient Roman emperors. He points to the specific empirical timeline of events surrounding UFC Freedom 250.
Okay.
He does this to prove that this phenomenon isn't just some hypothetical risk. It is happening right now, in real time, and with profound consequences.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this part is crazy.
Because the timeline is where the whole circus theory moves from an abstract critique to a documented reality. Let's lay out the juxtaposition here. According to Wells's blog post, right as the excitement and the media frenzy for this White House event was hitting its absolute peak.
The contrast is incredibly stark. Just hours before the opening bell of the fight, while the crowds were gathering and the VIPs were taking their seats, major world-altering announcements were quietly rolling out on the geopolitical stage.
Like what?
The source specifically points to major announcements regarding global trade blockades and the shifting of critical war treaties.
Wait, global trade blockades and shifting war treaties?
Yes.
We need to pause and realize what that actually means. We are talking about the literal reshaping of global economics and international security.
It's exact.
A trade blockade dictates whether a country can access food, medicine, or technology. It destroys supply chains and crashes economies. And a shifting war treaty redefines who is obligated to send their citizens to fight and die in foreign conflicts.
Huge stakes.
These are arguably the highest stakes possible in human governance.
They are events of profound historical, practical, and human significance. They are the exact issues a democratic citizenry is supposed to be actively monitoring and debating.
Right.
Yet Wells points out how the modern media apparatus responded to these massive geopolitical shifts.
How do they respond?
With near total silence, relatively speaking.
Unbelievable.
And this proves the sheer effectiveness of the modern circus. Despite structural changes happening to the world order on that very same day, the primary global headlines were entirely consumed by the spectacle on the South Lawn.
Of course they were.
The news cycle wasn't dominated by the economic implications of the trade blockades. It was dominated by fighter walkouts.
Wow.
It was dominated by analysis of the 92-foot metal rigging, who secured the knockout bonuses, and which celebrities managed to get cage-side seats next to the Rose Garden.
It is the Breton circuses formula working flawlessly in the 21st century.
Flawlessly.
The glitz, the production value, and the visceral violence of the arena completely eclipsed the shifting of global power. I mean, a knockout is instantaneous, it's visually undeniable, and it immediately triggers our mirror neurons.
Yep.
A trade blockade is abstract, it's slow-moving, and it requires you to read and synthesize complex information.
It's that cognitive friction again.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating this landscape? I want you to really reflect on your own media consumption and your news feeds on that day in June 2026. Or honestly, on any day when a massive cultural spectacle takes over the timeline.
It happens all the time.
How easily are the really significant, impactful events, the things that actually dictate the safety and prosperity of your life, just pushed down the page?
We barely even notice it.
Right, we see the cage, we see the lights, we feel the tribal excitement of the fight, and we completely miss the fact that the geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting right under our feet.
And that blindness is precisely why Wells wrote this piece for Knowledge is King. He is holding up a mirror to the mechanics of modern statecraft.
Yeah.
The event at the White House is merely the most literal physical manifestation of a psychological reality we navigate every single day.
So true.
By placing the Octagon on the South Lawn, the architects of the event simply said the quiet part out loud. They merged the governing body and the entertainment apparatus into a single, undeniable broadcast.
It really forces you to step back and take a hard inventory of your own attention span.
It does.
To kind of summarize the core of Mark Wells's argument here, he is issuing a stark, urgent warning to anyone who values their agency. If we want to remain a free citizenry, if we genuinely want to be active participants in a functioning democracy rather than pacified spectators in a high-tech Colosseum, we cannot allow the intoxicating thrill of the arena to blind us to the realities of political power.
We just can't afford to.
The cognitive friction of caring about policy is basically the price of admission for freedom.
It is. It demands a deliberate, conscious shift in how we consume information and allocate our attention.
So what's the takeaway here?
Wells is issuing a real call to action. We must actively practice looking away from the glare of the claw.
Look away from the glare. I like that.
When the production value is at its absolute highest, when the spectacle is the most overwhelming and intoxicating, that is precisely the moment we need to make a habit of looking at the periphery.
Right.
We have to train our brains to push past that dopamine hit and ask the harder questions. Like, what is happening in the shadows when the stadium lights finally go down? What policies are being quietly signed into law? What alliances are fracturing while everyone is just busy cheering for the main event?
It's a profound shift in perspective. And, you can absolutely still enjoy the fight.
Of course.
But you can never forget exactly where that cage is built, who paid for it, and what else is happening in the world while you are watching it. Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today, kind of building on everything Wells has laid out. If a single massive physical spectacle on the White House lawn can so effortlessly bury the news of global trade blockades and war treaties, you have to ask yourself, what are the countless algorithmically curated micro-circuses in our pockets distracting us from right now?
A really good question to end on.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep your eyes open, and always keep questioning the spotlight. We'll catch you next time.